historical context of the Old Man and the Sea. Living in Cuba in the late 1940s, one of Hemingway's favorite pastimes was fishing in his boat, the Pilar. This simple pastime contrasted greatly with the turbulent events of his life that preceded his time in Cuba. Hemingway served in World War I and World War II and witnessed the liberation of Paris and the 1945 schism within the Cuban Communist Party. Having viewed death and hardship in many forms, Hemingway's feeling of disillusionment was only magnified by his 10-year struggle with writing that preceded the publication of The Old Man and the Sea. Key facts about The Old Man and the Sea. Full title: The Old Man and the Sea. When written, 1951. Where written, Cuba. When published, 1952. Literary period, modernism. Genre, novella. Setting, late 1940s, a fishing village near Havana, Cuba, and the waters of the Gulf of Mexico. Climax: when Santiago finally harpoons and kills the marlin. When Santiago fights off the final pack of sharks. Antagonist: the marlin. The shark's point of view: third-person omniscient, although largely limited to Santiago's point of view. Introduction 1. Santiago has not caught a fish in 84 days. Rising action 2. Santiago sets out to fish on the 85th day. 3. Santiago hooks an 18-foot marlin. 4. He feels kinship to the fish, pulling the boat farther out. 5. The fishing line injures Santiago. 6. Santiago catches a dolphin and kills it for food. 7. Santiago's hand cramps. 8. Tired, hungry, and in pain, Santiago thinks of Joe DiMaggio. Climax 9. Santiago kills the marlin and ties it to his skiff. Falling action 10. Santiago fends off sharks as they eat the marlin's flesh. 11. Santiago returns with the skeleton and carries his mast. Resolution 12. Attending to Santiago, Manolin vows they'll fish together. On the coast of Cuba near Havana, an old widowed fisherman named Santiago has been unable to catch a fish for 84 days. His apprentice, Manolin, has been forced by his parents to seek another, luckier employer, although Manolin continues to help Santiago launch and retrieve his boat from the ocean each day. Manolin cares for the aging Santiago, bringing him food and clothing, and in return Santiago tells Manolin stories about baseball legends and his younger days fishing in a boat off of Africa. Every night, Santiago dreams of lions on the beaches of Africa. Early each morning, Santiago walks up the road to Manolin's family's home to wake him up for work. On the morning of the 85th day, Manolin helps Santiago launch his boat into the sea. Santiago rows over the deep well where he has been trying to catch fish for the past week and decides to try his luck farther out. Finally, in the early afternoon, he catches a 10-pound tuna, which he decides will be his meal for the day. Not long afterward, Santiago feels a hard pull on his line and realizes that a huge marlin has caught his hook. DiMaggio would do if he were in Santiago's situation. As it grows dark on Santiago's second day at sea, he lets out a small line and catches a dolphin fish to eat. He rests for a few hours, but is woken by the marlin jumping frantically. Santiago continues holding the line, although it has been cutting into his hand for some time. The marlin tires and begins circling the boat as Santiago grows weaker from lack of sleep and exhaustion. Finally, Santiago uses all his strength to harpoon and kill the marlin. Santiago ties the marlin to the side of his boat and begins sailing back toward Cuba. During the homeward journey, however, his third day at sea, Sharks attack the boat, tearing the flesh from the marlin. Santiago fights desperately, killing or driving off most of the sharks, but eventually the sharks eat all the flesh off the marlin. When Santiago pulls into the harbor, everyone is sleeping, and Santiago struggles to carry his mast back to his shack, leaving the marlin's skeleton still tied to his boat in the harbor. The next day, Manolin finds Santiago asleep in his shack. Manolin is overjoyed to see him, but cries when he sees the cuts in Santiago's hands. He brings Santiago coffee, passing the crowd of fishermen who are marveling at the marlin's giant skeleton. When Santiago wakes up, Manolin tells him he doesn't care what his parents say. He's going to start fishing with Santiago again. Meanwhile, as a party of tourists watches the marlin's skeleton and mistakes it for a shark, Santiago drifts back to sleep under Manolin's watchful gaze and dreams of lions. Santiago, the protagonist of the novella, Santiago is an elderly widowed Cuban fisherman whose ark seems to have run out. Hasn't caught anything in 84 days. Santiago is humble in his dealings with others, yet takes great pride in his work and himself, and is frustrated and embarrassed by his failures. He views his aging body as a kind of betrayer, and fondly remembers his younger days, when he was exceptionally strong and a successful fisherman. Other than fishing, Santiago's greatest joys are the time he spends with his former apprentice, Manolin, and the time he spends talking about baseball, and, in particular, his favorite player, the great DiMaggio. Besides Manolin, Santiago considers his only friends to be the sea, the fish, and the stars. In his conquest over the marlin, Santiago exhibits exceptional determination and endurance in the face of physical and psychological pain. Although he loses the marlin to sharks, the entire struggle constitutes a spiritual triumph in which Santiago emerges as a Christ figure. Manolin, he is an adolescent Cuban boy who has fished with Santiago since he was a child. Manolin is Santiago's devoted apprentice. He cares for Santiago in his old age, and encourages him in his fishing, even though Manolin's parents have forced Manolin to seek out a luckier employer. He is Santiago's only human friend, and looks up to Santiago as a mentor and father figure. Manolin exemplifies traits of fidelity, selflessness and compassion. He accepts hard work happily, never complaining. Pedrico, another fisherman in Santiago's village, Pedrico makes fish traps. Santiago gives him the marlin's head at the end of the novella, in gratitude for supplying him with newspapers that report the baseball scores. Martin, the owner of the seaside cafe, The Terrace, where Santiago and other fishermen eat. Martin provides Santiago with meals during his unlucky streak.